Hey everyone, Fina here from Fina Reads. It has been a couple of months until I last talked to you. Nothing happened, just work. It was a lot to do and I just didn't feel like editing, after sitting on the computer all day. It is what it is, life. Anyway, so I thought to say welcome back or something like that. I'll talk in a really speedy version about the 20 books that I read in the last 3 months. I'm not going into detail because 20 books is a lot of books to talk about, but I kind of wanted to catch up and, not leave anything out. I could have just not done it and just talked about the books that I read in November and skip September and October, but, I kind of felt like I want to at least wrap things up. It feels kind of unfinished if I don't do that. I don't know. And I'm going in the order backwards, not from the current book that I'm reading to the book that I read, the first book that I read in September, backwards, just because that's how the stack ended up next to me and we're just rolling with it. So currently reading, let's start with that because I'm in the middle of that and I probably will finish it in November, and that is The Fellowship of the Rings. This is a reread for me. I've read it in my tweens at one point and I actually never read the whole trilogy because I found it so boring at one point that I DNF'd it. So I'm giving this a try again. And so I'm about a fifth in at this point. I'm just enjoying it. Also first time in English, the last time I read it in German. Plus I really like this copy of Lord of the Rings. Then this morning I read Zoo, which is a really cool short story. It's 42 somewhat pages by A.C. Cross. And I love the cover. I just showed it to you already, but I really, really love this cover. And I read this morning. I haven't heard of it before. I found out about it this morning and I read it this morning immediately. And I'm super excited about this book, which sounds weird if you know what it is about, but it's the author's experience with his own mental health, and he packaged it up as a zoo. So he's basically taking you through a tour of his own zoo, but they're not animals. There are anxieties and doubts and those type of things. And I just loved the way he wrote that and the way he pictured all of these things that are going on from a mental health perspective, how they're interacting with each other, how some things in his past, and it's based on his actual life, but how things in his past have influenced other things and so on and so forth. He wrote it actually to get through the grief of his father passing, or to just handle it a bit better, I guess. And I haven't talked to him, so I'm paraphrasing things that I've read now somewhere else. And it's not only about the grief of the passing of his father, but about anything that happened when it comes to mental health throughout his life. And it's just written very, very well. And as someone who deals with mental health issues, I find it very refreshing on how he approached this topic. And it's not meant to be like a self-help book or anything. It's really just his way of showing people look, this is what's going on in my head. And I loved it. I thought it was an incredibly unique way of doing this. I love this short story. And I think it's just a really refreshing, super important short story that I think more people should read. I think even if you struggle with mental health, it is a very interesting way of looking at things, and it, maybe you take something away from it that helps you cope with things. And anyway, a long talk for a very short book, but it definitely left an impression. And I think this is going to be a short story that I will be thinking about for a lot longer than just a couple of days. The next one falls into the light and fluffy category, which is Caraval by Stephanie Garber. That was a random pick by my husband. We were at Barnes & Noble's the other day and he just grabbed this and said, this sounds interesting, read it. It's a YA book. It's the writing style is very typical YA. They're insta love and that kind of things in there. The premise is neat. It's nothing super exciting. None of the twists are really surprising, if you will, but it is entertaining, and I thought it was like a fun, quick read. I probably will not continue with the series because I felt it was written like a standalone, and then there was kind of something cobbled at the end that to make it into a longer book series. I also talked with Stephanie from Miss Richard Reads a little bit about it, and she basically said like it goes downhill from there. This is her favorite book, and yeah, you know, so that's why I made the decision. It was fun. It was fun while it lasted. You know, I'm happy I read it. that kind of book. All right, next up, and for this one I will have a more detailed review, is one of the quarterfinalists for Team Dragons in Space for the self-published science fiction competition number 2, or space fic as I call it, number 2, which is Clown's First Contact by Peter Cordrin. And this cover is, I find, one of the best that we had in our pile. But that was a write. I mean, his writing is really interesting. So the way Spacefic works, and I see if I can link some videos that explain this a bit more, is we got a pile of 30 books where we had to throw out any of those books that don't follow the rules based on what you can submit. And we ended up with 29 books that we actually had to read the first 10 to 20% from. And then we had to pick our favorites out of those just with a yes vote, like no ranking or anything, but just a yes, we would like to continue reading this, or no, we don't. And in my team of 8 people, this got actually 7 out of the 8 votes. And the first 10 to 20%, boy, they are definitely very engaging, and you're sitting there, it's like, what is happening? I need to continue reading to understand what's happening. Like, that's this type of beginning here. The ending turned out to be very different than I thought it would be. But again, I will talk about that in a separate review, because one, every quarterfinalist book gets its own review from the team members, and 2, I think it deserves it. It's definitely interesting. It definitely has a very high unique factor. And the cover, again, I think he definitely did an amazing job on picking this cover, whoever the designer is. I think this is spot on and really well done. The other quarterfinalist that I already read is Shakedowners by Justin Woolley, which is a way different book than Clowns, I'm telling you that much. But this is more a fun space opera. The purpose is to be more on the entertaining side. There's definitely a lot of Aussie humor in there. The author is Australian, if I remember correctly. So there's a lot of that type of very specific humor in there. And it reminded me a little bit of Spaceballs and Hitchhiker's Guide Through the Galaxy. So it had elements of that in there. Again, this will have its own review, so I'm not going to go into depth in here, but definitely check it out. If you like sci-fi and if you like more funny, entertaining books, this might be a thing for you that you want to take a look at. Next up is a book that also falls into category I did not expect that at all, and that was like a very spontaneous grab, which is Tennis the Flesh by Augustina Butz-Tarica. I'm probably butchering the name, which butchering is a very fitting word for this book. So this is kind of a dystopian horror novel. I don't know, it's set in the future, but it doesn't have, besides it being in the future, it doesn't have like any other typical sci-fi elements, but there's definitely a horror element I find in here. And the idea is that there was a virus that basically killed all animals, or not rather killed them, but they turned them into something. If you would have eaten them, you as a human would have died, and maybe they even turned aggressive. I'm not 100% sure anymore. They didn't go into super detail as to what happened, but what ended up happening is they killed all animals. Like, they slaughtered all the animals and they killed them all and burned them and whatnot. So there was no meat anymore. So they decided to breed humans as food. So it's a book about cannibalism, and it follows a guy who's working at one of the butcheries where, you know, those specific humans come in and are basically prepared to be slaughtered and then slaughtered. It is wild. It is very descriptive. So if it's not a book for the faint of heart, it's very descriptive, and if you finish a chapter, you think like, okay, this, like, it can't get any worse. Oh, it can. And there's a lot of, you know, when you think about slaughterhouses and butchers and all that kind of stuff, like, there's a lot about that. And then there's one particular scene that got me really heavy, was about animal abuse. And that stuff is where that was the moment where I was like, okay, this book, it definitely falls under those books where I'm like, I'm never going to read you again, but you will stay in my mind for quite some time. It is really interesting, like the underlying sentiment that the author is trying to convey through this book is really interesting. Also falls a little bit into that literary category, but it's not overwhelming, I find. And it's definitely weird. Weird is the right word for this book. There's just no other way of explaining this. I mean, wow. Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you... yeah, definitely be prepared. If this is something that you have on your TBR, if you're thinking about picking this up, I was not prepared. I had no idea what I was getting into. But man, that was wild. The one before was a dud. I read The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang, which is a romance novel about a woman, Asperger's. Yep, she has Asperger's, and she is terrible with dating. Like, she hates when people touch her. She hates the whole romance and sex part, and she hires someone to help her with that, and then, you know what happens. Like, yeah, it was, I don't know. I found the characters boring. I found it a bit, I don't know. It was just not my thing. I don't know. It was fun, but nothing exciting. My first book in November was Bloody Summer, and I listened to that as an audiobook. It's part of the Amazon Trespass collection. It's the second book I read in that, and that one I actually found really interesting. It's more written like a reporter style nonfiction. I'm trying to understand what happened a couple of years ago in a small town, and I thought it was really well done. And then at the end you realize, oh no, this is actually fiction. But the way it was written and the audio narration I thought was also really good. But the way it was written was really engaging. And I actually listened to it while I was crocheting, and I had to stop in the middle to be like, wait, what's happening here right now? So I thought it was, for, again, a short story, it was really well done. Not as well as Zoo, though. Zoo was a lot better in that regards. But this one definitely was a lot of fun, and I enjoyed the 30 whatever minutes that went. So another romance novel that I read was The Holiday Swap by Maggie Knox, and which I think is an author duo. Yep, it's actually Karma Brown and Marissa Stapley. So Maggie Knox is their pen name, and that was fun. Was a Christmas inspired romance novel of two identical siblings that switch roles. One is actually like a moderator in a baking show, not a moderator, she's a baker, or she's a cook in a cooking show or something like that. And the other one owns a bakery in a small town close by. And something happens, so they have to switch roles. And then, of course, they fall in love with someone in their sister's lives, and, you know, things happen. I love stuff like that. Like, this was a lot more fun and entertaining. Not that it was the best romance novel I've ever read, but it was definitely the first one that got my holiday romance movie flair going, and was enjoyable enough that I read that actually pretty quickly. And what it all started was this romance novel, Love on the Brain by Ellie Hazelwood, which came out a bit earlier this year, and I wanted to read it immediately after it came out. Well, I didn't. I read it now, which is okay. And that was a lot of fun. If you've never heard of Ellie Hazelwood, she writes women in STEM type romance novels. So all her main characters are women in STEM, and she, because I think she works in STEM herself, if I'm not mistaken. So she always makes it like that. And I think all of her novels are somehow based on fan fiction, whatever. I don't see it, but, you know, I'm not the expert in that regard. It's a typical romance novel. This one, out of the three that I read, definitely was my favorite. And Ellie writes good romance. I'm sorry. She writes good romance. It's really easy. It's super easy to read. You can read this literally in one night or in one day. And I did the same with The Love Hypothesis. That was her other longer book. And I'm looking forward to get the novel where she has her 3 short stories in. I've read one of them. The other 2 I haven't read because I'm waiting for the book to come out. I just prefer, you know, stuff like that over other things. Loved it. I mean, if you read one book by her, you know how those books go. Like, this one is very similar to The Love Hypothesis. Just the way the story flows is very, very similar. The characters are kind of similar too. So if you've read one, you know kind of how the other goes. But it's about the surrounding happenings, you know, that make it really entertaining. This one has a very fun side character, like her sidekick, or her colleague rather, is very entertaining. And, you know, it's embarrassing moments, it's fun moments, it's romantic moments, it's just a fun thing. Like, that's why I read romance, because it's fun, it's entertaining, it gets you out of your head for a day. The one before that was a short non-fiction audiobook, I Chose Darkness by Jenny Lawson. You know, again, I listened to it while I was crocheting something. I just needed something on the side while I was crocheting, because, I don't know, crocheting without in quiet felt kind of off. It was okay, you know, I like the humor, which is, I definitely want to read her 2 other nonfiction books, Broken and Furiously Happy, is that the other one? I definitely want to read those, because I like the humor of I Chose Darkness. The story itself was kind of, I don't know, it was told weirdly, let's put it that way. Ooh, and then I read a graphic novel, which was Sandman, Volume 1, which I was super thrilled about, and I loved it. Like, the art in there is amazing, the story is great, Sandman as a character is super fascinating, and I'm really excited to continue on with that. And now that I'm holding this in my hand, why didn't I continue on with that yet? I have to pick it up. Maybe I'll get another book in November, Volume 2 of this, because I have it laying around somewhere here. This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and was great kind of like as an in-between, like just something different. And as I said, the art is just incredible. The people who illustrated it did an amazing job. I'm just blown away by it. And now, hopefully soon, I can start watching the TV show, because that's the reason why I read this thing. I wanted to read it first and then watch the TV show for it. So hopefully that continues soon. The next book is The Magic Circle by Barry Ryerson. Isn't there like Ryerson? Somehow there's a movie reference in my head. I'm not sure which movie that is. But anyway, Magic Circle. This was also part of Spacefic. This is not a quarterfinalist though. So as I explained earlier, right, we had to read that 10-20% and then make a decision, yes or no. And this was one of those books where I said, ooh, the premise is really interesting and I want to know how this story ends. So Magic Circle is... you're in the future, something big happened, like a nuclear explosion or of some sort, because you have cities with protection against radiation, and there's a lot of fear about radiation in general. But with whatever happened then, I forgot the details, it has been a while. But with whatever happened, the result of that is that we have a handful of people with magical abilities, and the main storyline follows kind of a ragtag group of teenagers that all have abilities, and they found each other by accident, but they all live random different lives, and yeah, that's about how they came together and how they deal with that. And then there are some pretty big things that are happening throughout the story. So the way it was written, I was just very excited about the premise of the story. I was very enthralled, so I just had to read it all, even though it didn't make it into the quarterfinalist. And I just liked the story itself. Like, it was a great premise. The way the magic system worked was really fantastically well done. I thought it was really unique too. And the whole setup of the world. I haven't read anything like this before, which I think is why I really liked it and why I wanted to continue reading it. What I also liked about it, there's a lot of diversity in the book, and it doesn't feel like forced, or, you know, you added it for checklist reasons or anything. On the contrary, so it felt very natural. He has disability representation, he has BIPOC representation, he has LGBTQ representation, and it's all very very natural part of the world, and that's what I really liked about it as well. So from a premise and story and character perspective, it was really interesting. Unfortunately, it fell a bit flat from a writing style for me. It was a bit rushed at times, a bit too much telling, not showing. And I would like, Barry, if you ever listen to this review, get an editor to look over it. I think it would really benefit, because your story, the idea that you have, is amazing. I would love for you to have more readers of this book. And I could see that the writing style might stop people from continuing to read it, or from as many people picking it up. Anyway, that's that. So that's why when it comes to space fic, I definitely want to take a look at those books that didn't make it into the quarterfinalists, because I think there are some hidden gems in there that maybe didn't move forward because of, or the writing wasn't perfect, or there was something else going on, but the overall premise was pretty great. So we'll see what happens with that one. The biggest book that I read in October is A Taste of Gold and Iron by Alexandra Rowland, which is a slow burn fantasy romance with a little bit Middle Eastern inspiration. This was fantastic. It is a gay romance about a prince and his essentially bodyguard. I forgot what the specific word was for in that story, but it is some sort of a bodyguard. And how they get to know each other. Yes, there's a plot around it and there's stuff going on, but I find the main part of this book is really their relationship and how they get closer and closer and closer together. And it is so heartwarming. I love both of these characters so much. They're just amazingly well written. I just felt for them. Like, everything they went through, I went through as well from an emotional perspective. And just their romance and their relationship with each other, their relationship with their family and friends. And it was just all so wholesome that I'm just super excited that I got this book. This was actually recommended to me by Sarah Ferry Reads. It's definitely not for everyone, I tell you that much. But if you like slow burn fantasy romance, this is a book you should check out. The writing is amazing, the story is amazing, the characters are amazing. The magic system is very, very little, and that's really not what this book is about. While, I mean, the title is A Taste of Gold and Iron, it's about touch tasters. So when they touch metal, they can tell you exactly what metal is in the thing that you're touching. It was part of the plot, but it was very minimal. So the fantasy aspect of this plot, or of the premise here, is actually very, very minimal. And it's really more about the characters and how their relationship changes over time. And that was perfect. Like, if that's how you approach this book, knowing that this is what it is really about, you're going to love it. By the way, in October is when we had the Stephen King readathon, and that was, by the way, super, super fun. My team actually won, so yay, Team Annie Wilkes. And honestly, that was for me the most fun part. Not that we won, but the team itself. I mean, that we won was kind of a nice perk on the side. But the team itself, it was so much fun being in the Teams chat and reading all the messages that went back and forth, and the excitement of everyone, and everybody was sharing like, oh, I read this, and then everybody was strategizing on how they should apply certain books to get certain points or take points off of other teams. It was just so much fun to watch this and, you know, just sit there on the sideline and throw out some encouraging cheerleader-like comments every now and then. And as you saw, I mean, in October I read, I don't know how many books, but it was not much. I helped a little bit with the points, but it was really my team's effort and my team's success that they made it at the end. So I'm really excited for them that they won the Stephen King readathon. It was a great idea. So thanks, Jake and Stacey, for organizing this and for coming up with the idea. I hope you're doing another one similar to that. Then I had another one of those 30-minute or whatever audiobooks called Let's Talk About the Hard Things. Meh. There's not much more to say. Seriously, it was meh. I didn't care for it. It was boring. It was, again, one of those things that I was listening to while I was crocheting. It was free. That was its only perk, seriously. So that means we are now in September, and I finished what is the series actually called? Oh yeah, I finished the Risen Kingdom series with The Last Uncharted Sky by Curtis Craddock, and it's going to be really tough for me to figure out what series is going to be my favorite for this year, because this one was just fantastic. Like, there is no words for how amazing this entire series was. Blown away. This is the writing. I mean, the writing is perfect. The story is perfect. The characters are perfect. Like, everything is just so incredibly well done. You have an amazing, strong princess female character that goes through really a lot of shit, and so much stuff is thrown at her, but the grace with which she goes through this, and not in a, oh, she's perfect and everything falls into her lap type of way. No, she struggles, and, you know, she falls a couple of steps backwards, and like, it's just so natural and so believable, and oh, fantastic. The magic system is amazing. The world is so unique and imaginative, and man, if you haven't picked that up, it's The Alchemy of Something Sorrow, and I have no idea. Look for Curtis Craddock. It's probably the easiest way. Or the Risen Kingdom series. This is fantastic. And I really, when I'm at the end of the year thinking through what is my favorite book or series of the year, I really have to think, because I've read some amazing ones, and this is definitely a contender. Next one is Starbinder by Mark Timoney. So this is the prequel to The Blood of the Spear, which is Mark Timoney's An Eye of Eternity series. Jesus, I can't talk anymore. And this book is just gorgeous. So if you look at the hardcover, he definitely did an amazing job from a designer perspective. It is gorgeous. Too bad it was not for me. This is not the type of fantasy I prefer. I compared it with Lycania's trilogy. If you read Lycania's trilogy, which is supposed to be really close to Wheel of Time as well, just from the general, you know, overarching how things are handled and the story is told perspective. And I've heard people saying that The Blood of Spear also has like Wheel of Time elements in there. So if Lycania's trilogy, or based off of other people's input, Wheel of Time is something you like, you should maybe take a look at that. I did not like the Lycania's trilogy, and I did not like the way the story was told, and it was that really reminded me of the way the story was told, reminded me a lot of that Lycania's trilogy, and I don't know why my camera's not figuring shit out today, I'm sorry. Okay, the last 3 books, starting with Fairy Tale by Stephen King. I loved it till the last 2 chapters, and then I hated it. If he would have just not done the last 2 chapters, it would have been a 5 out of 5 stars, the best Stephen King that I've read ever. I loved the slowness of it. I loved all the fairy tale references. I loved the characters. I loved the darkness that was around everything. Like, just the way things happened was so fantastic. And then he had a weird romance scene in there that there was 0 point to it. There was at no point was there anything leading up to any of this, and it was useless. It was over in a chapter, or not even a chapter. It was like 2 pages. It's like, if I could rip them out, I would be fine. And then the last chapter, it was kind of after everything ended, like 10 years later or something, kind of a, you know, glance into the future. And I felt that was just unnecessary. You didn't need it. You could have just ended it when the actual story ended, and there was no point in doing this 10 years down the road type of thing. And it was so badly done, actually, that really, I hated the book at the moment. Like, with that last chapter, I was putting it down. It's like, dang it, why did he do this? Like, I was so angry about it. If that would be out of this book, and I was really considering just ripping out the pages, so if I ever reread it, that I do not have to read this again, it would have been perfect, because everything else about this book is great. But this last chapter and this one scene at the very end made me knock it down to a 3-star read. And man, I'm angry at that. It was September, and I'm still sitting here and it's like, why did he do this? This is unbelievable. And then we had Winterlight by Kristen Brittain, which closed out the Green Rider read-along that we did. Sarah and I might have been the only ones that actually read till the end. And this was also one, it was the second time that I now read it. So this was the second time that I read this book, because it came out last year, right? 2021. And then because of the read along, I read it again. And there were just things in there where this time was sitting, no, this was really badly done. There were just so many weird plot points that were unnecessary. There were scenes in there that were just unnecessary. It was, man, what did she do? And she added so much stuff to it that I just don't know how she's going to finish this out in book 8. that is, who knows when that will come out. But anyway, so this might be my least favorite now in the Green Rider series, just because of all of its flaws. If you're interested, Sarah and I talked about it during our live show with spoilers, of course. And I talked about it in other videos as well. And I think last year I did a review about this as well. Again, spoilers for the series because it's book 7 in a series. I still love Green Rider, and I will definitely read Green Rider again, the whole series, probably when book 8 comes out. I need a break now though, because reading it 2 years after another, because I read the whole series last year, now I read the whole series again, that might have been a mistake. More or less. I mean, I still love the character, right? There's so many things that I just love about the series and that just are wholesome and make me feel to like, this is coming home, you know, this is my favorite fantasy series, and there's so many elements that I just devour about it every single time I read it. This is, maybe I'll skip it next time. I don't know. This is just not my favorite book in this series. And then the last book, which was also one that Ian picked for me in August. We switched TBRs, and this was one of the 3 books that he picked for me. So, and I finished it in September. I didn't make it in August. And I don't know. I'm really torn on this one. Like, my first thing, I always, like, when I finish a book, not for all books, but for books where I know this is important, like when I put my notes together, I write, like, just dump all my thoughts into like a notepad type of thing. And the first word on that, because I had to look it up again, it has been 3 months ago, was meh. Meh. And once I read the comments, I remembered again why I thought it was meh. Yeah, after 3 months, I didn't even know anything anymore. I was looking and I was like, I remember there was something that I was just sitting there like, but I forgot why. So I looked at my notes, and they said something around characters are very one-dimensional, all very fled. There was one character I really liked, but that character didn't matter much because he was, I think, killed halfway through the book. Then there's trying to be epic fantasy, but then not pulling through with what epic fantasy needs. The magic system is kind of, you know, on and off, good, but not really. And there were just too many things where I was just like, it felt like a ginormous prologue to something, because it was also very slow. Nothing really happened till the last 100 pages, and then it was like flap over. And yeah, it was just weird. I did not vibe well with it. So I still kind of am planning on starting the second book, which is Jade War, I think, right? It's the red one. To at least see, you know, maybe it changes. I don't know. But yeah, I do not get the hype around this one. I'm sorry. Sorry, Ian. I know this is one of your favorite books, but I did not. I did. All right. Are you still there? Did you fall asleep? If you stayed till the end, thank you so much. I'm sure this is going to be a long video. I have a couple more videos that I want to, you know, record in the next days, and then I'll just put them out whenever I have time. I don't think I will have a regular schedule going forward. But thank you so much for sticking around. Thank you so much for those who have been asking for me. I had a couple of you like Chaz and Derry who reached out and were just like, are you still okay? Are you still doing stuff? You know, are you okay? Just generally, because I haven't heard anything from you. Because I was quiet. I was reading a lot of Discord, but I just didn't text much. And I didn't do much on Twitter and Instagram either. It was just generally, I don't know why, I was just generally quiet. But everything is good. So thanks for the concerns. Thanks for reaching out. Thanks for being here. And yeah, I'll see you with my next video, whenever that will be. Bye.